appreciate the opportunity to be here. I've been doing this a long time in regards to commercial real estate. Spent most of my time in retail. Done a lot of work down here. In fact, we just opened the At Home and then the old Kmart down at East Bay. We've been working on a Ross Stores deal down there for 4 years, trying to get that deal done. And so I appreciate cities, especially in today's market, that want to learn more, want to understand what the market is. It's constantly changing in our market. I look back in regards to years ago, and obviously Utah was a different state to a certain extent 30 years ago in regards to what we had to sell in contrast to what we are today. Today we're probably one of the top, not top tier, but just below top tier retail markets in the country. We've seen stores like Container Store come in here. We've seen the Shield Sporting Goods stores come in here, to Utah as a whole. Part of what I thought I would chat a little bit about today, and kudos to Mary, who works with our company, and there's, as Coldwell-Banker Commercial, there's probably 30 to 3,500 commercial agents across the country, and she's in the top 2% of that. Plus, she lives down here in Utah County and does a majority of her work down here and does a fabulous job. But I thought today I'd take a little different perspective than to talk maybe about zoning. Send you a little handout I'd like to talk to you about. We do a lot of work with major tenants. I've been fortunate enough to do that, and we've probably done a good portion of the major tenant work along the Wasatch Front. Thought it'd be interesting for the cities to understand what the tenants look at. Just because a property's zoned and it's 20 acres doesn't mean Costco goes there. Or just because it's 2 acres and sitting on a corner doesn't mean that Maverick Stores goes there. What goes into what a tenant decides and defines a location for them, I thought it'd be interesting for the city to chat a little bit about it. That's why tenants hire people like ourselves, is we spend the time and the effort. We try to have the understanding in regards to growth, in regards to retail sales and all those types of things that go into this. So I passed out a little outline. I don't know if there's enough to go all the way around, but starting off, what happens is a tenant comes in, they ask us to fill out what they call a site criteria sheet. This sheet can be anywhere from 2 to 5 pages, very specific information on it. In regards to current growth, in regards to local sales, in regards to how's the city to work with. And that's what we're going to kind of focus a little bit on today. In fact, here, I'm getting too old. I got to have some glasses to read my own notes here. So we fill out these tenant site criteria sheets. We send them back to the tenant, whether it's a Costco, a Shills, a Target, Home Depot, Walmart. They basically take that information. We try to get it as accurate as we can. A lot of times we'll deal with cities to make sure that we have local subdivisions that have been approved, the number of lots. All that comes into play in regards to this criteria. Because what they do with that is they turn around and take DSW. They just opened at University Mall. They run it through a program that takes 72 different types of demographics and comes out with a number that tells them this is what your volume at that store is going to be. And based upon that number one, if it's high enough, then it's something they want to pursue. And then from there, we go into all kinds of different things in regards to construction costs, lease rates, and all that kind of stuff that we'll get into. So the first thing a tenant does when they come into a market without talking to the city or anybody else is let's take the city of Provo, okay? What locations does Provo have that we can go develop on and that we could buy 10, 20, 30 acres, depending on if it's a tenant or developer, and what fits the criteria for them and what they're going to construct and try to build? The next thing we do is they have us do a population density. So if we decide to locate at East Bay Shopping Center, what's the population density around that? And if we locate there, what is our trade area? Trade areas, when I first started doing this 30 years ago, trade areas, we just draw a circle. It's a lot different than that now because you have guys like Ross Stores that now have 18 stores in the market. We have 6 more new approved deals along the Wasatch Front. So as you draw these trade areas, you got to draw them in such a way that they really are indicative of what that location is going to pull to that area. So you got to understand, where's Provo Town Center pulling from? Where's Sam's Club pulling from? And it gives us an idea in regards to that, because if I put the trade area too large, down the road, when we go to do or look at a second store in the market, and my trade area exceeds that, a lot of times the tenants won't look at that, or they come back to me and say, why did you draw such a big trade area in the beginning? So we really try to drill down on the trade areas in regards to what reality is. Freeways are big things, expressways, accessibility, all those types of things come into play. And so as we put this package together for them, trade area is a huge deal for them, because that, based upon our trade area, determines how many people are within that population and how many people are going to show up at the store, and that kicks out on the research we talked about earlier on their criteria in regards to what their volume is going to be. And with retailers, these guys, it's all about volume and what kind of numbers they can do and sales they can forecast. The next thing they look at is traffic generators. Okay, if we go to Provo Town Center, why are people coming there? What's causing them to do? Is it a Cinemark Theater? Is it the Home Depot sitting out in front? What's across the street? Is it the office buildings? What's generating, what's causing people to come there? Now, there are certain tenants in the market that draw a lot of people. We did the Cabela's deal up in Lehigh years ago. They bring in 4 to 5 million people a year. We did the Shield Sporting Goods deal up in Sandy. They bring in 3.5 to 4 million people a year. That is what we call traffic generators. You can also use theaters, Trader Joe's. I know I've seen a lot of the emails and different things about Trader Joe's. We did the one in Fort Union with Trader Joe's. They opened, 9 months ago up there. Those are the kind of things we look at and the tenants look at in regards to what's around us to help, this area in regards to the traffic. And when we look at those kinds of things, that's what helps us extend our trade areas, because if there's tenants in there that may only have 1 or 2 or 3 stores along the Wasatch Front, our trade areas can get a little bit bigger, and the amount of people coming into that market increases, which again goes back and increases the sales forecast and the sales numbers for the tenants. We also look at traffic counts. Traffic counts are huge to a lot of these tenants, because if the traffic's not there, they're not going to be able to do the business. And that's why you see a lot of these big retailers or shopping centers, all that on these main corners. We worked on Station Park up in Farmington for 8 or 9 years. And even today, the food guys are doing great. The retail's getting better. But it takes a long time when you try to create something that doesn't have the exposure. And yeah, you got the freeways right there, but it's just not sitting on Main and Main. That'll end up being a heck of a project over time, but it takes people a long time to understand how to shop there, how to get there. Even though it's got Apple, it's got all the big tenants in the plaza area. You got Nordstrom Rack and all those kinds of guys. So traffic counts are huge in regards to the way and where these retailers locate. The biggest thing we're running into today is accessibility. We drive around with all these tenants. Access is huge. And it's not just what's today. Now all of a sudden we're getting asked the question, what is UDOT or what is the county or what is the city going to do 10 years from now? I'll give you a quick example. We did the Costco out at Valley Fair Mall. Opened the store was doing fine. Then all of a sudden they brought in mass transit. They shut off roads on 2700 West. They shut down access roads off 3500 South. Costco, who does huge volumes, their average store now I think is $155 million per outlet or per warehouse. Store dropped 30% overnight. We get a call, as we normally do when stores don't do so well, from the real estate guy going, what's going on out there? So we go out, tell them this is what's happening with construction. They want to come out and verify that, so they come out, we drive them. It takes us 18 minutes to go from the off-ramp to the Costco store. Okay, now they've answered their questions. As soon as that's up, as soon as they finish that in 18 months, Costco sales go back up. Interesting point is the people at the mall had negotiated with UDOT to put that slip ramp in. I don't know if you've noticed that goes on the east side of the Costco in the mall. They put that access in, and Costco's sales went up like 12%. And I look at it, 12% is not 12% on, $10 million. It's 12% on 130, $140 million. Accessibility is huge for tenants. It gives them the ability to do more volume, and it's all about us as the consumer. I just look at myself. I have 4 daughters. It's all about getting there as fast as you can, parking in front, walking in, and having this experience inside a store and getting back out. That's what's changing, I think, with us. Is none of us have any time anymore to just drive someplace and take a few minutes, and it's like everything, we're on task to get it done fast and get in and out as quick as we can. We're seeing that a lot on this access, and access is huge in regards to sales numbers of these retail tenants. And what happens with them. 3500 South, out just west of Valley Fair Mall, when they start putting in those mass transit lines down the middle of the road, 2/3 of the retailers there, literally dropped off the face of the earth because you couldn't get there. You could only turn at the lights and flip U-turns, and people just weren't willing to do that. So retail sales drop, which when that happens, rents drop, and projects get in trouble in regards to that. So access is becoming a big, big thing in regards to that. Visibility. As you see, a lot of these tenants love visibility. When we did the Costco down in Spanish Fork, we had to deal with Springville. And it was quite an interesting process to go through those 2 cities in regards to that. But the chairman of Costco, Jeff Brotman, comes out and he approves every site. He comes out and sits down, drives around the car, approves every site. And the great thing about down there when we did that is both those locations sit right on the freeway. So that deal ended up coming down to just economics in regards to who offered them the best deal. And then we ended up obviously in Spanish Fork, but exposure is huge in regards to that and what these tenants do and the success of them. And as a city, you want them to be successful. I mean, you want them to do numbers. You want people to go there. And it helps the city out. We've met probably in the last 2 or 3 years with 15 or 16 different cities along, the Wasatch Front, talking about what Mr. Grove was talking about up here in regards to outlining and defining areas within your city that have the most opportunity in order to do development in regards to that. I can't get off course here, else I'll just start blabbing. Competition. Competition is becoming a big thing. Not so much that the tenants are afraid of that, but what is the competitor doing? What kind of volumes are they doing? Utah County, it's been a little bit of kick against Utah County because there's not a lot of major tenants that are doing above average, if that makes sense, in regards to what they would say their average store would do in Utah. We go back to Ross Stores. They have 18 stores in the market. The store we have down here is just a titch above average of those 18 stores. And so that's part of what we have to deal with when we start to look and bring additional stores in here is what's the cause of that? Why are not retail sales here like they are in Layton when you compare Layton and Davis County and Weber County in regards to that? And so those are things we have to try to figure out how to overcome in regards to that. We did 5 or 6 restaurants up at University Mall, of which there's only, I think, 1 or 2 of them left in regards to that. And they were great locations, family-type restaurants. Why did they struggle down here? And so when we put these things together, that's all the types of questions we get asked by these tenants in regards to what's happening to it. Why is it this way? Why are we going to be different? We just signed, and I think here in a couple months, Nordstrom Rack opens up across from the mall up there. And it took us 1.5 years to get that deal put together and get them comfortable with it. And our whole ploy was, I think your Nordstrom Rack store will do more volume than what your department store did, which I think will probably end up happening there in regards to just the product and what they carry and the way we sense and what we see being the successful tenants down here. Signage. Tenants love signage. Cities hate signage for the most part. But you got to understand that identification for tenants off major highways, freeways is incredibly important in regards to that. Summit County, perfect example. Kimball Junction, we worked on a project up there. They killed the project. But during that process, we told them, and they were wondering why they weren't that successful up there in regards to the tenants at Redstone and some of the other centers up there. Part of it was nobody knows they're there. You drive by there, and there's a sign that you have to use binoculars as you drive by to see who that is and see that it's TJ Maxx and Michaels and so on and so forth. And so just as of late, you go up there now, and now they've got some signage out there so people can see and know who's there. It's incredibly important that these tenants have that. When we did Station Park, one thing we went to bat for, the city had an ordinance we couldn't put pylon signs over 60 feet high. But with the freeways up there, 60 feet high was worthless because you couldn't see them. You couldn't see them from the freeway or anywhere else. So we got a variance to go it's either 110 or 120 feet high. And that's part of what's going to make that successful over time is the identification. If we hadn't had that, most of those tenants wouldn't have gone there, and hence the project probably wouldn't have happened. So it's incredibly important that we look at those things. And all these tenants look at that, and that's part of the package they put together was they take them into these committees and get these kind of projects approved. Zoning, obviously zoning's got to be right in order to build and construct their buildings. We talked a little bit about location costs. Different cities have different kind of impact fees and those types of things. All these tenants come back in, and it's just a total cost number in regards to construction costs, impact fees, all those types of things, and that determines whether they make a deal or not. Some cities have been willing to waive some of those depending on who it is and the kind of volumes they do and what kind of rebates back the city gets from tax revenue. Retail store sales around. We talked a little bit about this. So normally I have to fill out within a 3-mile radius of where they're going to locate on what the sales volumes are of any store that's over 15,000 square feet. It's important to them to know if people are successful there. And then construction costs. Construction costs in Utah now, just in the last 6 months, are going up. We did a Ross Stores in Vernal that they were able to construct for $74 a foot. We just got plans or bids back on plans, the exact same plans, for $90 a foot. So the difference of that is the tenant's rent goes up. Well, these tenants, as they do their analysis, have bridges, and it's hard for them sometimes to pay more money. And so sometimes because of construction economics, we see that won't happen. Perfect example is where we did the Shields deal in Sandy City. When Sandy came out with their ordinance and we developed the plans and put them all together, took them through the city, got them approved, sent them to 3 different contractors, the bids came back at $140 a foot. This is just for the shell and core and the outside. Well, based upon that, we had to get $45 a foot rent. I've never in my 30 years got $40 a foot rent, let alone 45. So we're unable to make it work. So fortunately, we went back, sat down with Sandy City, and gave them and realized what's the most important thing for you to have on these buildings. We were able to downsize, or kind of, I don't want to say downgrade, but we're able to manipulate the plans enough to still be within what the city wanted and make it work for the contractor. And you go look at the project today, and some of the most successful little QSR guys are out there doing incredible numbers, and a lot of those stores are in the top 5 or 10 stores in the chain. And so it's important, I think, for cities to be a little, you have to have your qualifications, you have to have your criteria out there. But you got to understand costs and all those types of things come into play on that. One thing we always do, we talk about is site visits. We go on tour, bring people in, we bring construction guys in, we bring operations people in, all that to approve these types of deals. And it's important for obviously the tenant to see these things. One thing we love to do when we do that is we bring them into the city. Okay, and part of what I want to close on here is the city right now along the Wasatch Front is the most important part of us getting deals done these days. Okay, stores that we talk about, from Costco to Shields to Ross to Maverick stores, all those guys, being a part of a city and knowing that a city cares about them and is there for them is incredibly important. You got to understand all those tenants give back to the cities. Shields in the last 2.5 years has given over several $1 million. They give 10% of their profits back to the community. And so it's important for cities to have relationships with these tenants, not just during the process of getting plans approved and those kinds of things, but being able to carry that on. When these guys sign leases there or they close, it's a 40 or 50-year term. And I just believe it's so important that the cities go in there and have a relationship with the Costcos and the Targets and those kind of big tenants so you understand what's going on with them. Because things are changing. You see Kmart closing, you see Shopco being closed, you see Provo Town Center being kind of exchanged to a new owner. You see all these things happening. The city, in my perspective, is the most important part to see some of those get redeveloped. When Southtown Mall was just sold by Macerich to a new group out of LA, first thing the city did was hop on a plane, go down and sit down with those guys, and what are your plans for this? Well, they're now going to spend $40 million on a renovation or redevelopment of that whole project. And we're involved on that a little bit in regards to some of the exterior tenants and some of those types of things. So I just believe it's so important for cities to understand who's in your market and have a relationship with those tenants, with the managers of those stores, because then you'll understand kind of what's going on. I just brought these, so I'm not going to enroll them, but so what we do with cities is we sit down, and Mr. Grove kind of hit on this a little bit when we pulled it up and said, hey, these are the areas that we could see development taking place. I've been in enough cities to where we go in there and they say, oh, here's 40 acres up here, but there's no access. There's not many people around. And we think Costco ought to go here. Well, there's not a chance in heck that Costco's going to go there in regards to that. And so we sit down with cities and walk through and say, these are the kind of corners or these are the kind of properties. This is the type of real estate that you could look at to do some redevelopment. We're doing a deal right now with South Salt Lake, of which started out to be a 700,000-foot shopping center. We're down to about 250,000 feet and about 400 to 500 residential units. So the market's changing, and we have to change with that in regards to make it successful. And we just signed a lease with Winco to go be a tenant up there at 95,000 feet. And it's, so you just have to look at things in the light that now it's changing. It's not all just retail and it's, 100 acres of just asphalt and buildings. And we're starting to look at it as more mixed use type projects because we're out of real estate along the Wasatch Front. And I think 75% of the projects we're working on are all redevelopment. And redevelopment takes a lot of time. We've been working on the South Salt Lake deal since 2009. And we're just now getting to the point where we're getting some of those signs. So patience is important in regards to that. And in closing, one thing I think is always important for cities is when brokers like us or even a tenant walks into the city, to be educated in regards to the locations and the sites that you have available. Educated being that you understand some of the things we talked about, and the only reason I pass out that sheet, you can understand the traffic, you can understand impact fees, utilities, all those types of things are incredibly important to these tenants in regards to that. But I think the city being educated, we walked into some cities, and I won't say the names of some of them, but we took Costco in one of them. Basically, they said, you know what, we're not a big box tenant right now or we don't want big box in our city. So we did another deal up in another city, and every week I get a call from the city for the last 5 years wanting to know when we can get a Costco deal done now. Because they realize the importance and the impact one store like that can have, on a city in regards to the type of revenue they get back. Especially some of the stores we have in Utah, it's a heck of a market and doing over $200 million. And the one we just expanded down on 17, 18th South and 3rd West will probably be closer to $350 million now with the business center there. So it's important, and I hope I don't bore you to tears, but I just think it's important that you understand what tenants and developers look at when they come in to look at property. And when you sit down as a city, you start to designate what are the most important locations. You look at that criteria. And you look at what they're looking for. You look at, is it really available? The South Salt Lake deal, I have 92 operating businesses we have to move on 120 acres. Okay, we've bought the first 17 of them, and now we've done a Winco deal. It is tough to put those things together in regards to that. And so in closing, I just hope that as a city, that you reach out to these tenants, to the developers, you understand what you have there. We've been doing a Ross deal at East Bay for 4 years. We've opened 5 stores, and we're still trying to get a lease signed with them. And it's getting to the point now where it's so frustrating that they're almost ready just to just bail from the deal, and just because it's like, I'm not sure we're going to get it done in regards to that. But I think involvement from the city to understand that and to go sit down, I think it's C3's, the financial group that currently has that foreclosed on that, sit down and see what can be done to help that out. Because I'm telling you, it is, it's just been a tough process to the point to where they want to turn around and sell the center, and you're not willing to put a company in that's in the Fortune, I mean, the top 200 now, which would help the cap rate and allow you to sell that center. It's just crazy. It just gets frustrating. And it would be, to me, a huge benefit to the city because of the sales and other things that then you can attract with them. But anyway, I appreciate the opportunity. Any questions or anything when Mary, well, we'll go ahead.
I'm really interested in the section where you're talking about how the city can help.
Yeah.
And I think our administration does most of the heavy lifting and full-time economic development.
Right.
My question is there anything that city council members can do that would be helpful and not even
Well, one part in here, just because of time I didn't tap into, is I think the best thing you could do is streamline your processes. We're out in West Jordan. We're subdividing a lot, a 2.5 acre lot. We're just splitting it in half. It took us a year. The biggest thing you can do is streamline the process as you go through. You don't have to, you just don't let them waltz through the city, but you make it easier on them in regards to timing and that, and getting them comments back on plans and all that, because that's a big thing. When we did the Shield Sporting Goods deal with Sandy City, and sometimes Sandy is great, and sometimes, boy, they can take forever. And so we sat down with the mayor and economic development, all those people, and said, how do we get this thing approved? It's 270,000 foot building. It's $65 million building. How do we get it approved in the time frames we need to in order to get under construction to open the store when we need to? So we put everybody on an airplane, flew them out to Reno, and spent a whole day out there walking through the shields out in Sparks, showing them everything, why we need this, why we do this, why we do that. And they approved the deal in 45 days in regards to plans and everything else. And you see now it's incredibly successful retailer there. So I think cities just have to look at it in the light. You don't have to lower your standards, but boy, streamline that process, because in our day and age, time sometimes kills deals. And I go back to 2008, and in 2007 I was ready to retire in 2009 if everything would have gone through, but then 2008 hit. We lost well over 100 deals and probably 6 shopping centers, including Station Park, which we had 60-something deals in process, and in a matter of 30 days was gone. And so timing is everything to these guys. And when they slot those things in and you get a slot for an opening for a Costco, boy, you got to do everything you can to meet that time frame and get them under construction and get them open. Because if not, then they flip. Some of these stores only open 3 times a year. And it's just so important to do that. And you don't have, like I said, you don't have to give it, but boy, be friendly. I mean, embrace them in regards to that. Just because I think it's so important, in regards to that. So.
Do you see adding mixed use, like office and housing to shopping centers, like improving the lifespan of them all without having to redevelop? Because as I understand, it's about 15 years that, before a mall has to rebuild itself.
Well, a lot of times we do ground leases with some of the big tenants, and they'll do the ground leases for 50 to 70 years. They won't basically redevelop the store. What they'll do is they'll just redo the interiors. Most of the time, Target and Costco, those guys, it's every 8 to 10 years. They'll basically come in and redo the interiors in regards to those. So I think mixed use is just because you you can't afford retail land prices anymore. Retailers can't afford to, to pay the rents on some of these deals. And so I just think it's real important that we put in mixed use. And right now, apartment guys can pay 3 or 4 times more than what retail guys can. And because they can go up.
That may be your most important point.
Yeah.
That mixed use has become part of the business on a regular
Yeah.
basis.
Well, and understand this, we're doing plans now for some of these centers, almost every one of them. In 20 years, some of those parking lots turn into multifamily, and you have the ability to put in deck parking or parking structures and those types of things. Yeah, we're running out of real estate, and we're pretty much out of it unless you go clear to the far west side. We've been looking for a site for Costco on the east side for 7 years, and I can't find 15 acres, and chances are we're not going to, in regards to that. So mixed use, I think, is an important part of making these things all work now, because land costs, the South Salt Lake stuff, we're at $35 a foot for land, and that's tough numbers to, make $12 rents work in regards to that. I'm going to turn the time over to Mary, and she can enlighten you even more so.
Well, I'd like to say thanks for the invitation to be here, and I'd like to applaud Provo City for what you're doing to bring people together to talk about these issues. And I'd like to also give a shout out to the previous 2 presenters, because they've really set the stage for, the question of population growth and sales tax, and why do you care about that? And I'm not telling you anything that you don't know, is that most of the funds for your operating budgets for your general fund come from sales tax dollars. And so population growth, retail growth, how do we pay to run our city? And an important thing that Robert said is mentioning the redistribution of sales tax based on population. So when you think about the anticipated growth for Utah County between now and 2030, 2040, 2050, we know we're going to grow a lot. The question is, where are we going to grow? So I hope my mouse clicker will work from here. These numbers are from a presentation that I did earlier in the year, and on this graph you can see single family permit concentration by city in 2014 alone. And so you can see that single family permits in the west part of our county, they had 1,148 new residential permits. The central part of the county, which includes Orem, Provo, and Vineyard, 886 single-family permits. Apartment permit concentration by city in 2014, kind of astounding. 1,478 new multifamily dwellings in Central. So you get lumped in. When I was on the Orem City Council, we called it Orem Provo. Now that I'm speaking to you, it's Provo Orem, right? But we also have to throw in Vineyard, because Vineyard is a brand new emerging town all by itself. So really it's Provo, Orem, Vineyard that is all considered your trade area. And an interesting thing about Provo, and Stu mentioned this, talking about considering trade area, where do your retailers, when they're looking at a geographic region, they're looking not at the rings. We used to do radius circle demographics. I had a long talk about a dozen years ago with a retailer about why radius circle demographics do not work in Utah County. And it's because if you go out 5 miles, you have a big lake and you have mountains. And so rather than doing radius circle, you have to do drive time and you have to do trade areas. Where will people go? They're going to flow just like water. They're going to flow where there's least resistance, where there's transportation, where there's connectivity. So the interesting thing about Provo is it's long and linear, and in many cases, Orem is more convenient, a more convenient destination for a Provo resident than an area of Provo is. Think about how long it takes for someone who lives up in Edgemont to get to University Mall versus going down to Provo Town Center Mall. So those are the kinds of things that you have to think about. Well, as we look at this building permit concentration, I pulled some information. I recently read Mountain Land Association of Governments Trans Plan 40. So MAG is responsible for long-range planning for transportation, for this region. And they look at how are we going to move people from one place to another, and they don't just look at roads, they look at public transit, and they make their projections based on the patterns of growth that they see right now. So in the, and this is available on their website, the Transplan 40 says that historically, the growth in Utah County since 2000, only 10% of it has been in the Provo-Orem Vineyard area, while 352% growth has been in Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, and Eagle Mountain. So again, make that relation between historic growth, where are the people growing, where are the retailers looking for where the growth is, where are they projecting that they're going to need to provide services in retail. It's moving to the north. So that's what's happened in the past. Here's what MAG projects out to 2040. They project that the west area will increase by 180,000 people. So that's Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, and Eagle Mountain. And that the central area, Provo, Orem, and Vineyard, will increase by 67,000 people. Also, I didn't point this out, but look how much growth there is in the south area. So that'd be Springville, Spanish Fork, Payson, all the way to Santaquin, growing to 293,000 people. So from that chart, you can see that the projection is that by 2040, the core of Utah County, the greatest area of population, will have moved up to near the point of the mountain. So we see that trend happening with jobs. So when I think about land use and retail and commercial real estate and development, I've worn many hats in my career. I've been on the Planning Commission, I've been on a city council, I'm a commercial real estate broker, I do volunteer work, I've served on the Governor's Commission on Aging, so I have the ability to look at things from multiple perspectives. And sometimes I get accused of wearing my developer hat a little bit too much, but if that's the case, it's because I see the impact that the built environment has on our quality of life. So I think Provo is doing a lot of things right. I think there are some areas of opportunity that I would encourage you to think about as you plan. Think about the fact that a lot of jobs are moving to the north. I don't know that you can stop that from happening, but what can your response to that be? Why are jobs moving to the north? Well, it's because the point of the mountain is the only place claimed by both Salt Lake County and Utah County. Yeah, Salt Lake County, where's your job center? Oh, the epicenter of economic growth is right there at the point of the mountain, and it's all ours. You ask Utah County, and we say it's the Silicon Slopes, it's all ours. It is claimed by both areas, which points out the importance of talking to your neighbors. What happens in Orem impacts what happens in Provo. What happens in Vineyard impacts what happens in Provo and Orem. So one thing I really admire is that the Provo City Council and the Orem City Council sit down regularly to talk about what we are doing in our two cities. I would encourage you to continue to do that and take it to a deeper level. You can't just draw a line at your annexation line and say, this is all we're going to focus on. How you connect your roads, how you connect your zoning ordinances so that they're compatible, it all makes a difference, and it all helps prepare your city for growth that makes sense and that helps deliver the vision that you want to have for your community. One area of opportunity, of course, is the west side area. I looked on your website, tried to find your southwest area plan. Maybe it's still in production. Okay, so you're still working on it. I think this is a great area of opportunity for you. Other areas of opportunity that I see just looking down from my view on what's going on in Provo, I think that the Plumtree Plaza Shopping Center is a humongous area of opportunity because it's right there on the bus rapid transit line. It's just down the hill from the Orem City, or from Woodbury's redevelopment of University Place. If I were you, and maybe you've already done this, but if I were your city, I would be reaching out to the group that bought Plumtree Plaza, and I would say, what can we do to help make this a great place? What is your vision? Here's what our vision is. Here's what we think we need, and talk with them about redevelopment, because I'm pretty sure that there's a redevelopment plan for it. Maybe you're already well in process? Good. Okay, that's good to know. Yes?
We met with them last week, and that discussion took place. Their plans will be right after January.
Perfect. That's great. I'm glad to hear that because I do see that as a great area of opportunity. Another area of opportunity, and I hope you're already on this one, is what are you going to do with your mall? You know, malls are places that need to be refreshed on a fairly regular basis. You know, the economic life of a commercial building is actually pretty short because during the course of a generation, what people are looking for in that commercial building can completely change. So as you consider not only your housing policies, you have to look at where are opportunities of redevelopment and make redevelopment easier to do. Redevelopment's expensive, it's time consuming. Anything that you can do to work collaboratively with property owners as you talk about redevelopment and what that area can be for your city is really important. And I know you feel like you don't, you know, there's the property rights, they own the property, but you can work with them to help make sure that the property owners understand the vision for your city. So as I look at the southwest area, you've got about 4,500 acres, most of it zoned agricultural. One thing that I think of as I think of how will that area develop, and maybe you've already tackled this one as well, but your current residential zoning standards in your city code are basically set out to correlate to how big of a backyard you want. And there will always be a demand for backyards. I don't foresee any time in the future when the demand for a backyard will go away. But I can tell you, based on my own personal experience and based on experiences from serving on a city council where we had to take applications from developers who wanted to develop at higher densities than the neighborhood next door. And you would always have the residents in the neighborhood next door worried that if we did higher density, we were going to get the wrong kind of people there because it was going to be affordable housing. And all these words are interesting to me. The idea of affordable housing at some point in the past became synonymous with low-income people we don't want. However, when I think about affordable housing, I want my housing to be affordable. It doesn't mean that I want it to be run down. It doesn't mean that I don't want to take care of it. I just don't want to spend all of my money on housing because I want quality of life. We've all known people who built such a big house they couldn't afford to put any furniture in it, right? So I don't want to have such a big house that I can't afford to go on vacation, or that I can't afford to help my grandkids, or that I can't afford to help that generation that I thought was moving out and has suddenly come back. Anybody here had that experience? Yeah, I am shocked. My husband and I were empty nesters for 4 months. And we lived it up for 4 months. We had so much fun for 4 months. We had sent our youngest off to college. You know, we had kids married. We were starting to collect grandkids. And then they started coming back. And it's like, okay, wait, I didn't plan for this. I thought I was going to convert that empty bedroom into my office, you know. So the plans that we've had for what we've envisioned we would do with our single-family homes, I think that we're going to have to change some of those plans. And the types of single-family homes that we build and the types of communities that we build, I think we're going to have to rethink that. So I draw a big X over the current zoning because what I see happening as areas do grow, I see a real need for a mix of housing types all within the same little community. Rather than putting all of your density over here and all of your big lots over there, people, especially in Utah, seem to be location sticky. That's a phrase that I use when I'm trying to explain. I recently did a very large assisted living center, and I explained the importance to this developer from another state of people in this area being able to continue to shop at the pharmacy that they're used to shopping at, continuing to go to the church that they're used to going to, and continuing to be near the neighbors that they're used to being friends with. And so rather than go where the land was cheap, go where the amenities and the services and the people feel comfortable. So it's a lot more expensive to do this infill development, but it's been a lot more successful because people maybe this is true everywhere, but I see it especially here, people really want to stay in their neighborhoods. So think, what does that mean? When my daughter grows up and gets married and moves out and would like to live near me, are there housing choices for her to be able to live near me? Not in my basement, but just someplace close by. And so communities that offer a mix of single-family homes with yards and that offer density and maybe attached housing and neighborhoods that offer housing for people in all stages of their life and in all income ranges, because poor students eventually do grow up, hopefully, to be productive citizens and have incomes. If they want to stay in their neighborhood, is there an option for them to move to another street? And so one concept that's become, popular around the country is the concept of mixed use and planned communities. Well, one thing I would encourage you to do as you think about where you want to be, whether it's commercial zoning, whether it is residential zoning, don't assume that you can tell the market what it is going to do. So collaborate with developers, collaborate with the retailers, and collaborate with your partner cities around you so that you know what the needs are of your residents and of the businesses and of the retailers and of the surrounding communities. Be flexible in your zoning to encourage the outcomes that you want. And the outcome is if you do want to be a city of 10,000 square foot lots, that will determine what options you offer for future generations who don't necessarily want 10,000 square foot lots. Avoid the mother may I philosophy of zoning. Every city that I'm aware of has a mother may I philosophy. So they put a zone in place, and if you want to do anything different, they say we've got you're required to do residential 10,000 square foot lots. If you want to do anything different, we have an option for you. It's called a performance development or a planned unit development or a PD zone, we called it in Orem. And if you've got this many acres, you can come in and ask us, but you have no guarantees. So I would suggest that a way of compromising would be to set up some criteria that developers can count on. So they know that if they meet these basic requirements, they have an opportunity to be able to do development in your community. It doesn't mean that you have to give up your standards. It just means that you give them some published set, because that's really important. I recently had a large apartment project for North Utah County that probably will not move forward because the developer cannot do any plan. They need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to do planning with no assurances from that city that after they do that they have a chance of getting their project approved. So set up something that they can count on, figure out what that needs to look like, what you want it to look like, and is it going to deliver the outcome that you want. Encourage denser development that provides open space and shared amenities so that you have clusters of communities with parks that are provided by, pocket parks provided by the developer itself or amenities provided by the developer itself. That'll take some of the pressure off of your costs of providing infrastructure. Also, retail development follows rooftops. Density and demographics determine who those retailers are. I feel like I'm just echoing what Stu said. Find successful communities and copy them. It doesn't mean copy them exactly, but what you have to do what works for Provo. I heard Mayor Curtis say that in a presentation earlier this year, and that really resonated with me, is that Provo is not Orem and Provo is not Lehigh. Do what works for Provo, figure that out, but publish it and get it out there and promote it. Sell yourself as a community that will thrive to 2040 and that will not suffer from the exodus of everybody moving up to the point of the mountain. So, with that, I'll stop. If you have any questions for me or Stu, be glad to take them. Yeah.
children were leaving.
Mhm.
And the value of the fear of growing old alone dominates the psyche of people 65, 75, 85. It becomes a huge motivation to have family around them. And as we have baby boomers aging, we're seeing a shift, I think, in attitude about growth and density in housing types, partly because of those strong feelings about family being closer to age. Because adults want age in place, but they don't want age alone.
Right, good point. And one of the, well, while I was on the Governor's Commission on Aging, one of the things that we talked about a lot were multi-generational households. And I'm seeing this, right? I've got the kids coming back, and it's a good and a bad, you know. I've actually found my daughter cooks dinner for me, so I come home to a hot meal. How nice is that? But I'm not at that stage of life where I'm really prepared for a 9-month-old crying in the middle of the night. So addressing multi-generational households, I know that basement apartments, auxiliary apartments, is a huge concern for a lot of cities. Salt Lake City has been talking about how do we work with multi-generational households so that you can have grandparents providing support for children and for grandchildren without becoming a community of renters. Well, I have news for you. We are already a community of renters. We never really own our homes. We're always renting our homes. And the idea about renters somehow not being, you know, there's an attitude about renters, right? I mean, let's all admit it. There's an attitude about renters. I think that we have experienced a sea change in home ownership as a result of the economic downturn from 2008 to roughly 2012, is that there are more people who view a mortgage as shackles and chains. And they like the ability, they actually, there are many people who prefer the ability to be able to rent because it gives them flexibility to be mobile in case of emergency. And so as we talk about, you know, emergency preparedness, viewing renting is not such a bad thing. In fact, a lot of seniors make choices to move into independent living communities that are still in their same neighborhood where they rent. And it's like living in an all-inclusive cruise ship because you have the option of going down and having a really nice meal prepared. You've got people to go do things with. You've got transportation to take you to the doctor if you need it. But you still have your own independence, but you're not owning that unit. You're just renting it. So good point. Okay, thank you all very much. I appreciated being here.